I think your cable's finicky too, because when you were wriggling it, I could hear you coming in and out.
Yeah, sorry.
Stop with the fiddly cables. Maybe you need a new cable.
It happened again.
It did happen again.
It happened again.
Maybe you should sit totally still and just move your mouth.
My God! Okay.
Like I said, don't move anything. Don't move your hands. Just move your mouth.
Right.
This is like podcasting with a mannequin or a ventriloquist dummy. Let's talk about the subject for today's podcast episode, which I'm not even sure is a good subject. It's just I wanted to talk about it, and you seemed okay with it. So, yeah. So first of all, okay. We were originally going to do a classic movie. We had some problems picking a classic movie to watch together, and we still may do that for our next episode. But I had this thought that maybe we could talk about our top 3 favorite climactic scenes in movies, or as I would also characterize them, penultimate scenes. These are the scenes or the sequences in movies where it operates like a bridge in a song, where it takes you from the first parts of the movie to the end of the movie. So it basically is the most important scaling of the pinnacle. It's where everything has to get tied together. Everything has to get set up so that when you get to the ending, you feel like all of these different threads have progressed in a satisfying way, or at least you feel like the movie has taken you on a journey. So this is the part of the journey where you're just sort of cresting the hill and you're just about to hit the downhill part and finish off your hike. I know I'm mixing a million metaphors, but anyway, the reason why I wanted to talk about my favorite penultimate sequences is actually, it's one of the movies that I'll talk about later, but I was watching a penultimate sequence in a movie, and I'll tell you what it is later. But in that, when I was watching that scene, I came across it on YouTube just accidentally, because I was actually randomly watching swing dance examples. That's just a random thing. So I was watching people swing dancing, and then this movie sequence was served up to me through the YouTube algorithm. And I was sitting there thinking how incredibly well that scene set up the ending of the movie. It established forward progress for the main characters, but I was particularly struck by how all of the different elements of the movie, like music, like editing, especially editing with cutaway shots and reaction shots, and how pacing, how it all worked together so beautifully. It was like the most beautifully packaged bundle ever. And that made me think about other examples of penultimate scenes or sequences where I thought, oh, this sequence did an amazing job in setting us up for the ending of the movie. It is not the ending of the movie, but it sets us up for the ending of the movie. So that's why I wanted to talk about our favorite penultimate sequences. What was your reaction? Did you think I was completely coming out of left field with this topic? I will just say the other thing, which is that the classic example of a great penultimate scene is the trench sequence of Star Wars, the original Star Wars.
Yes.
So because it's an example of, you never lose sight of the main action, the main forward momentum, which is to attack the trench and to get the shot. But at the same time, there's all this editing back and forth between people watching, like, from the rebel base, and then you also get the perspectives from inside and you also get the perspectives of all the different fighters, but none of the editing and none of the different perspectives interfere with the forward momentum of that scene. So that makes it an amazing penultimate scene. It's incredible.
Yes.
Like, it is the most classic example of a great penultimate scene that I will think. Okay, what were your reactions to my idea for this podcast?
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea. I haven't thought about climactic scenes in movies or penultimate scenes in movies or ones I liked in a while, because I'm so focused on liking the whole movie, I guess. Mm-hmm. So when I actually went through looking through all the movies I've seen and thinking, okay, what's actually my favorite, specifically what's my favorite penultimate scene or climactic scene, not all of my favorite movies had, my favorite climactic scenes. Like
I know.
I have favorite movies for different reasons and some movies are better because they have a really great climactic scene, and some movies are just like good as one piece, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So, it was super interesting to go through. I didn't outline it like a top 3 or anything. Maybe I could decide that during this episode, but I outlined a bunch of them that I really like, and I am excited to talk about what makes them good and some of my favorites.
Yeah. You're right though that it's number one. You're absolutely right that some of my favorite movies don't have a great climactic scene. That's a great point, and I'm glad you said that. And then two, I agree. These are not. I didn't do an exhaustive review of all of my favorite movies to see which ones did and which ones didn't. I just sort of picked 3 at random that I thought were great examples. So you can talk about all the ones that you liked if you want.
Sweet. You can start. You go ahead. It's your idea.
So the first great climactic scene I want to talk about is the one in When Harry Met Sally. And I want to talk about this one. So When Harry Met Sally is a really famous romantic comedy. It was written and directed it was written by Nora Ephron, and it was directed by Rob Reiner. And it's a classic. I can practically recite every single line in that movie. And one of the funny things I just want to say about, identifying this scene is that, I told Dad that we were going to be talking about climactic scenes, and he was like, "Oh, you mean like the scene in the deli where she," because he was of course
Yeah.
Came up with the R-rated version of climax, so that's why I started saying penultimate scene instead of climactic scene, because your dad was being so juvenile. But
Of course. What the
anyway,
hell, Dad? Come on.
Yes, but the penultimate scene to me in When Harry Met Sally is the scene at the wedding. So it's the scene where when Harry and Sally have hooked up, have slept together for the first time, and then they had an awkward sort of resolution where they were like, it was a mistake, it didn't need to happen. And then a few weeks pass, and then they attend the wedding of their 2 best friends who got together because they were supposed to be on a blind date with with Harry and Sally, and instead they fell for each other. So that scene is amazing because I think number one, it's paced beautifully. So it's taking place at this wedding where all the wedding celebration is happening, like it's all the traditional things about a wedding, and yet there's all this roiling feeling underneath. So you have like this action within a very small space where Harry's trying to be normal with Sally, but then they finally go back into the kitchen, and then they have this very dramatic conflict, in just very short, like a very short exchange that conveys it all. It's a very economical scene. Do you know what I mean? It's like done with incredibly beautiful efficiency in terms of what it gets across with as little dialogue as possible. And the funniest thing about this scene, it clearly establishes that he has nowhere near realizing why it meant something to her. And she's starting to realize that it did mean something to her, but he's not on the same page, and it's devastating, and their whole friendship is on the line. But the thing that makes that scene brilliant is that after she slaps him, this very dramatic scene in the kitchen, and I will never forget, they're like holding these little hors d'oeuvres in their hands, these little appetizers in their hands from the wedding, which is such a great little detail. But then after she slaps him, they run back into the main part for the wedding. And then they're making a joke at that point. They're doing a wedding toast where their friends, Jess and Marie, are talking about how we were so grateful that we weren't attracted to you at all.
Yeah.
And so everybody's laughing, and they've just been through this incredibly dramatic sequence, So it both honors the spirit, what was so funny about that movie, because I think that movie is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. It honors what's so funny about it, but it also gets across real emotion, and it does it in this beautifully efficient, very economical way with beautiful cutaways back and forth, and then these funny comedic moments in between. So that's one of my favorite examples of a penultimate scene.
Okay, because I'm confused now because I thought we were talking about the climax of the movie, and not the scene before the climax. You know what I'm saying? Like
right. And I'm saying that it is this is the climactic scene. That's what I'm saying, is that I think that this is the climactic scene in When Harry Met Sally, because it's followed by a montage, and it's followed by Harry running to go meet Sally at the New Year's Eve party. But that to me
Right.
is like the ending. Do you know what I mean? I think the wedding scene is the thing that sets up everything to the happy resolution that follows. I think it's the crest of the hill. I know you may disagree
Well,
on that.
no, well, I mean, isn't the climb? I mean, honestly, I'm not well versed. I feel like
I'm not either.
in
This is
sort of
just how I
describing
feel.
storytelling. But if you're describing the climax, you're describing the most exciting part of the movie, or what is supposed to be the most exciting. The lead up before that is kind of like, that's like more of the abyss moment, right?
Yeah.
Or the all is lost moment.
Yeah.
So like in the wedding scene, it's like all is lost. They're not friends anymore. They hate each other.
Right.
You know, and that leads into the climax, which is like they realize that they love each other and they have to profess their love for each other.
Right. And
so
for me, the wedding, I agree that there's room for interpretation and disagreement here, but for me, that wedding scene is actually the climactic scene. It is a scene where they exactly realize how they feel and what's at stake. Do you know what I mean? And then everything after is sort of a little bit of a downhill climb.
Well, no, I do disagree with that, because because in that moment they don't know what's wrong. They just know they're both mad at each other, and they both have their own way of thinking, and they're trying to listen to each other, but it's not working out at all. But because if you look at, the narrative structure as like a slope, right? We're going up. Like at this point, tension is high. We're going up, and then right at the peak is when, when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you realize you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. Like, boom. And then it's like a come down. It's like, okay, now we're good. Now we're in love, and this is great. And then you go into the last interview with them.
Yes, I could totally see how you could see that. But for me, the peak is really when they're fighting in the kitchen. Because for me, the peak is the most negative and ugly that they have ever been towards each other. They have this long friendship, and that is the most naked and bare they've ever been with their feelings for each other. And it's horrible. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, that to me is like the peak. And then everything afterwards is like, oh, he's trying to get back their friendship and he's still clueless, right? And then he finally realizes it, and so it's all wrapped up in a neat little bow when he declares his love for her. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I can totally see how you could argue that would be the climax, but for me, that's just the neat little bow tying thing. For me, the peak is the fight in the kitchen, and this whole way that scene is. And it's also a peak. It's also a climactic scene because they're at their best friend's wedding. They're at their best friend's wedding. Their best friends have achieved like true love and happiness, and yet they are at their very, very worst in terms. They're at the crescendo of their conflict. They're finally able to be honest with each other in a way that they haven't ever been honest with each other before.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
that's super interesting that you view it that way. And well, When Harry Met Sally was on my list solely because of that last scene the last scene where he's running when he's running, and then when they finally talk to each other. Also because it's just so, I love that they miss, because it's a New Year's Eve party. I love that they miss the countdown, and everybody starts cheering, everybody starts kissing like right when the clock turns to midnight, but they're still in their turmoil. They still have to like spend like another minute to like work it out between them. And it's one of the most memorable sequences, and it's definitely what made the whole movie. I mean, obviously there was a whole nother movie. It's my favorite rom-com of all time too. So
there's some really funny editing in that sequence you mentioned too. Also, when I'm talking about like the cutaways and the reactions, because you see Sally dancing with all these guys, and she's like, ah ha ha, and then she leans over and she's like, I want to get out of here right now, and Marie's like, you'll never get a cab. Anyway. So that's an interesting disagreement. So why don't you go next in terms of what's your next example that you want to talk about?
One thing I wanted to get out of the way for liking climactic scenes was just like franchise movies in general, because I feel like any movie that's part of some big franchise like Marvel or
Correct.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, all of these movies have amazing climactic scenes, and I think that's because that's mainly that's kind of like the draw of the movie. It doesn't matter, what happened before those scenes, or how you felt about the movie. You're gonna know that at least like it'll have some cool ending. Like these characters that I vaguely am familiar with now, like they're just gonna do something cool,
That is correct, except that that's what some people really hate about superhero movies.
Yeah.
Because they think that those final climactic sequences are just noise and banging without real contribution to story, So they think that, and they're just way too noisy and crowded and messy looking. Mm-hmm. So that is the number one thing that people hate about Marvel, for example, or DC. So it's just this general feeling like, they went over the top. And I will have to say that I am especially critical, because I expect great climactic sequences in the franchise movies. I'm especially critical when they don't pull it off well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So critical of that. And to this day,
there is a separation.
Yes. To this day, I hate in Endgame. I love Endgame, as you know, but I hate the scene where all the women line up. And they're like, don't worry. Yeah. I hate that scene.
That just ruins the whole moment.
It
ruins it. And Infinity War did it way better, too.
Yes.
So,
correct.
I mean, and I was going to definitely mention Endgame because, that's the Endgame.
Yes.
But, there's a separation between, the movies that do it well and the movies that don't,
Yes.
I was gonna mention Shang-Chi, but again, didn't. Yeah, I'm gonna mention that till the day I die. But
okay.
Like the ones that do it well, though, I think the ones that do it well service the story in at least a passable sense. Like,
correct.
Yeah, this makes sense, and that's solid. It's not something perfect, but it's great. But they're also at least very memorable, super memorable like sequences. And I think the Harry Potter movies, almost all of them have something that's super memorable about their endings. I can remember.
Interesting. I don't remember any of them.
That's funny. I mean, maybe because I grew up with them and I've rewatched them a lot. But each movie to me had something that was unique about their endings, that separated them from the rest of the movies. Not all of them really. Like Deathly Hallows Part 1 is like kind of, they're running in the woods and that's like the whole movie.
Yeah.
And you can, that's the one where Dobby dies. So like that's also, anyways. But it's like Chamber of Secrets, the giant snake and the temple.
I do remember that.
Of Slytherin. There's that. And then Prisoner of Azkaban, there's the werewolf thing. And, Goblet of Fire, there's the big tournament. So like they have, a lot of these franchise movies have these spectacles that they set up from the beginning of the movie to make sure that like, all right, we're delivering this by the end of the movie. Like this is going to be something you're going to enjoy and remember.
Can I just tell you, as a side note, I would be, if I were a director of one of those movies and I knew that I had to deliver that kind of spectacle for a climactic scene, I would be shitting my pants.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I literally would, because it would just feel too massive. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everybody would be on me, screenwriters, whatever. Everybody would be on me in terms of, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this. And I'd be like, I just got to advance the story and get it over the finish line. And there's so many special effects, you know what I mean? Like, I would be freaking out.
Yeah. It's so it is a testament, when it's done well.
Yes.
And I think the movie, out of all these movies, I'm referencing that does it the best, like just with no question, is Return of the King, probably. I think.
Oh, wow.
Because that is the climax of climax. Like the whole movie is a climax.
That's correct.
To the whole Lord of the Rings story.
Yes.
So, all the way back, from like The Hobbit too. So, not only is it just like, does it keep that energy up the whole time, but the actual final sequences are just some of the most beautiful, amazing spectacles you'll see. And the tower falling and the ring, they have to drop the ring in Mordor and stuff. So it's the most iconic in terms of like big franchise like endings, I think. And I don't think Endgame comes close to that, or any other Marvel movie.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric. And I actually thought about Return of the King for this episode. But what was interesting to me was that Return of the King, like just what you said, it's one big climax to the whole series. I felt like the movie had, and this is actually an incredible feat to pull off, but it had so many end sequences. Do you know what I mean? Like every single one of those end sequences, it, there's multiple like that. Those scenes are seared in my mind.
Yeah.
I think that the time when it starts to be super 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 memorable in terms of crescendo, that the first one for me is the riders of Rohan coming down the hill, and then you get then you then you get the ginormous battle with the elephants. Then you get the battle outside the gates of Mordor. Then you get the throwing of the ring. But then you get the coronation of Aragorn on, which is beautiful, on that beautiful ship-shaped, Minas Tirith courtyard. So it's all that. I can't believe that they did it so many times. And yet you, as a viewer, you were sitting there going, oh my God, when is this movie gonna end? You know what I mean? Like, you didn't feel that way. So
No.
you just kind of felt like it kept on. It was able to keep on taking you up to crescendo before it had this peaceful, very sad goodbye.
Super peaceful and super sad. Yeah, those are, and you just feel like everything needs to wrap itself up, but it is very sad.
Yes, yeah. So, that's actually the thing about climactic sequences, though, is that they set you up for those moments at the end that feel so much so quiet and either the pinnacle of happiness in that everything is sort of triumphant, or it's got this super sadness, but it's a good sadness in a way. The ones that leave you utterly devastated and shell shocked with nothing to hang on to, those are the worst. I can't watch those movies. All right,
just because I mentioned Marvel too, probably the best ending in a Marvel movie I'd have to give to Guardians, the first Guardians. I think when they, the ship is falling and Groot, wraps him up and he's like gonna die and it's really sad. And then, the ship crashes and then he does the ooh like dance battle.
Yeah.
And then he grabs the gem and they all hold hands and like,
you're right.
Face that together. I think that's probably the best one. And I think the Guardians, the first two Guardians movies do a really good job with their endings. And I would say Endgame, but that's just, I don't know. That's sort of like a default, and it's very fan servicey, obviously. So
yeah, I loved parts of the Endgame climactic sequence. I really did love parts of it. I actually think that the beginning was incredibly dramatic. So I will never, ever forget the moment that I noticed when Thanos first blasts them from the sky. I will never forget the moment that I noticed that Ant-Man actually shrinks again. So he's standing there normal sized, and then you see him blown backwards by the blast, and you see him become this tiny little ant sized again, and then everything goes dark. And everything collapses, and that is the most definitive beginning to a climactic sequence that I think is great. And it just wasn't perfect throughout. There are like some really clunky moments throughout, and so I still hate the way that Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, was like, "Hey Peter Parker," I hate that.
Hey Peter Parker.
Hey Peter Parker. Got something for me? Anyway.
Yeah.
You got something? Anyway.
And I love Winter Soldier too, but it's like the ending is not particularly unique. No. Like, I love that movie. Love it. But, it's like, what happened? Oh, the ships. They took down the ships.
Yeah.
That was cool. But it's not like, ending.
Yeah, and that was, by the way, this is an interesting thing in talking about climactic sequence and how emotionally satisfying they are. This may be the thing that I loved, as you know, the Spider-Verse sequel. But there was no... I just felt, obviously, since it ended in the middle of it, like just was such an abrupt cliffhanger, that there weren't really... I guess the climactic sequence is when he was trying to escape from the what's-its-face. What was that region, that area?
Oh, Nueva York?
No, he was in the center.
Oh, when he was in... Oh, I don't know, spider headquarters.
Yeah, like where all the secret force of the secret spider.
Yeah, I don't know
was.
what they were called.
Yeah, but anyway, that sequence was crazy, and I guess that would have been a climactic sequence. But then you feel yourself gathering for like a quiet, peaceful, or at least a bridge of some kind or an ending, and then you don't
Yeah.
get it. You're just plunged right back, and you're cut right off brutally. So that's just
True. Yeah.
That was a shock to the senses. Okay.
Yeah. So
All
the
right,
next one will be when it's good,
Yeah, yeah.
or when it's an ending. So
Yes.
yeah.
Let's hope. All right. So the next one that I was going to talk about was Groundhog Day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the climactic sequence is the entire final day. So it's a long climactic sequence, and you can argue that it began a different. We can argue about when it began or whether or not it serves as the climactic sequence. But the moment when so literally before that moment, you are going through day after day after day and different phases of him accepting his, like, struggling with his fate that he's reliving the same day again and again. But then that day opens up with Bill Murray giving this incredibly profound report. And so it clearly,
on Groundhog's Day, like the whole thing was
long-
that he just hated having to do that, but then he
Yes.
just gives like a really thoughtful, really just like makes you think,
Yes.
and everybody's like,
I can think of no better place to be than spending a long, lustrous winter in Punxsutawney. So
Punxsutawney Phil.
and so that moment establishes the climactic sequence, the scene that leads up to the ending, the scene that leads up to it the day finally resetting itself. And again, I think that the thing I must admire the most about climactic sequences is when they do so much with not over explaining things and not over showing things, So for example, you quickly see that Bill Murray's in a very different place. Like, you quickly see that he's grown. You quickly see that he's got a million errands that he's just set himself in service of being a better person. You like see him like running around helping people. And then you start seeing things from the other point of view. Like you see it from Rita's point of view and from his colleague's point of view, where they're like getting ready for the night dance and everything like that. And then you see them realize, but what's so insanely funny is that from their perspective, this is just some guy who changed overnight. Like,
Right.
He was a total
Yeah.
jerk as far as they
Yeah.
knew, And so then
Right.
but it so quickly establishes how incredibly he's changed. And you, the viewer, are in on the secret, the fact that it took like years and years and decades to do this. But from the scene's perspective, from the sequence's perspective, it's done so quickly and so well and so beautifully. You know what I mean? Like, all the emotional beats are hit. There are so many comedic moments. They still stop and do like little sly winks off to the side of really funny moments, like his cheesy colleague who is trying to hit on that woman in the bar, and he puts down a tip for the bartender and he takes it back when he leaves. And so there are so many little funny moments like that where
I didn't catch that. That's so funny.
yeah, there are all these little sly comedic asides, and then every interaction that he has with random people is hilariously funny. But then by the end, it becomes something incredibly beautiful, and the music changes to reflect how the emotion is changing too. So that by the end, he was like, "I know your face so well, I could carve it, with my eyes closed." And then the music in the background is really beautiful.
The beginning,
that sequence.
the beginning is more like, wah, 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 wah,
yeah.
wah, and then the end is like,
Exactly.
yeah, I totally saw it.
So that scene to me is a masterpiece of editing, dialogue,
Yeah.
music. Everything is just so
Right.
incredible. And then by the end, like when he wakes up, you're just like, oh, cool. He wakes up and it's the next day finally. You know what I mean? Because it set it up so beautifully.
Right. I rewatched it a few months ago, and I remember, like, he's come a long way, and he's grown, and you're seeing just like a very beautiful climax and ending to a movie when he's finally loving and accepting to Ned Ryerson.
Yes.
Like, no amount of days I feel like would ever get me to feel like, oh, I'm excited to see that guy. Ned Ryerson, you remember me? Like, never. I feel like I could never like that, but What does he do at the end? Doesn't he like kiss him?
No, well,
he's
he
just like,
buys. Ned Ryerson says that he bought every single possible form of insurance from him.
mhm.
And then he was just, and then Bill Murray's totally generous and listening and patting him on
Oh,
the
right,
back,
right,
like,
right, right. Yeah, because
and
he
then
did
yeah,
business and stuff.
and he was like, "Let's go somewhere to celebrate," and then Rita goes, "Let's not, let's not spoil it."
Yeah, yeah.
It
I
was
just
great.
that was something, because at the end of the day, even the most annoying people, you'd show some
Yes,
some
that's
love
right.
to. So, yeah, that was a really beautiful resolution to a movie. I didn't bring that one up because I knew you would, but also because I just remember
Oh my
there.
God, I'm so predictable.
No, but well, you mentioned it already, but I just remember there being so many things. Like, I couldn't narrow it down to one. All these other movies, I'm like, oh, there's that one moment where that thing happens at the end, and that's
Yeah.
what makes the whole movie worth it. But Groundhog's Day is like, oh, it's this, and then he does this, and then he goes over here, and then I mean the most memorable thing is when he does for me is when he does the ice sculpting. But even that, I was like, was that on his final day, or did he just do that just cause like one day, and then he just kept going.
Yeah, no,
So
it was his final day, and what was again so funny about this is it was so efficient. Do you know what I mean? Like it was so quick. Like you see this ice sculpture, and then you see like Rita and his buddy watching it, right? And then all of a sudden, you're like, "Did you know he knew how to do that?" No.
yeah.
Anyway,
I love that he took the time to learn all that stuff too. The piano lessons. Like every time he would
I
have to
know.
reintroduce himself to the piano teacher every time. So
Yes,
that's funny.
yes, and give her $1,000
Yeah.
every time, or $5,000 every time. Yeah. All right. What's your
Oh,
next?
right, right. Yeah. I'll just mention, I just recently rewatched Get Out. Have you ever seen that? You have? Okay. Um, Wait, have you?
I have not seen it from start
If you,
to finish.
that sucks. I feel like you have to watch that. Or I feel like you have to watch it from start to finish.
You know I won't. I
My
think
favorite
you
thing
walked
about,
me through the jump scare many a time.
I would happily do that if it meant you would watch the movie. But,
Okay.
because I don't like horror movies, you know that. And because they're just sort of, they're not very pleasant. Like I like movies that, make me feel good. But horror movies make me feel, not good. But the horror movies I do like are the ones where, in the end they let the main protagonists rebel against whatever force of evil is in the movie, right? So that's why I love Get Out, because in that I always remember
Yes.
in that last scene, like
Yeah.
he beats the shit out of, he kills everybody. That's why I love Scream too. Scream is like is a series of people that you get a jump scare with this guy with a mask, but then like they tussle it out, and like I guess it's maybe described as like a slapstick horror. But Get Out specifically,
Yeah.
it was a build up to this huge scene where he has to escape the house. So that's one of the most brilliant sequences in a horror film, or in like a thriller type movie that I've seen. So definitely Get Out is a huge one.
I actually think I've seen the sequence that you're talking about in Get Out. And I think that I watched it because you were trying to get me through the scariest part so that I would watch the rest of the movie, which I still haven't done. I think I watched that final sequence that you were just talking about because I think that you walked me through the sequence with the biggest jump scare. And I remember he's sitting frozen in the seat. Like he's
Yeah.
frozen because of they're about to, I guess, take his life force or whatever it is. And
He's
what
in
I
the sunken
remember
place.
about, yes, but what I remember about that sequence is how incredibly compellingly framed it was. So you're just looking at him sitting in that chair for the longest time, and the fact that it's framed and it's so quiet, and the anticipation gets built up, for when he frees himself and escapes. That to me, I understand why you chose that. And even though I've watched that sequence, I guess I would argue that I can now watch the rest of the movie. But I did find that sequence kind of terrifying. Just, it's like my worst nightmares. That sequence when you're frozen in place and you can't do anything, that really gets at like my deepest, darkest fears. So I understand that you want me to watch this movie very badly on the merits because it's such a great film. I get that. I understand it. Maybe I'll give in.
I know I'm a hypocrite, but I feel like, I mean, yeah, it's just an area that I feel like you need to engage with. You know, you don't watch Attack on Titan also because of that kind of stuff, which makes sense. I feel like more for that because it's like objectively, I think, more terrifying. But Get Out is kind of an out there premise. So, and I think it should be definitely appreciated more for its filmmaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's definitely one that has a just a really great ending to it.
All right. So the next one that I was going to talk about was Swingers. And that was a sequence that I came across when I was actually looking at swing dance examples online. I was only looking at swing dance examples online because I was listening to an old song from the 50s called Run Around Sue. And I've loved this song disproportionately for some reason. I just love it so much. There's something so catchy about the beat. So I was looking online for examples of people doing. I recognize that the beat of "Run Around Sue" was for swing dancing. So I looked online for people who've done routines to this, and I actually found some really good ones. Although I went down a rabbit hole of learning about the difference between East Coast swing and West Coast swing. So there's so many rabbit holes online. But then I came across that final climactic sequence in Swingers, where they're out at a bar. And Jon Favreau's character gets up his courage to talk to this girl at a bar, at the bar, and there's a lot of dancing going on, and he's really been going through this whole sequence where he's just had his confidence shot down on every possible angle, every possible occasion. But you also, throughout the movie, you get the vibe of him and his group of friends. And what's interesting is to me about that movie in general, which I kind of love that movie, is that there's such brash talking guys. You know what I mean? They're like, "Oh, he's so money, man. Oh, baby, baby, baby." Like they're so brash talking, and yet they're so sweet to one another. You know what I mean? They like really, really. You can tell how much they love each other, and that's actually referenced in this scene. So I love the build up. There's this total build up where he gets up the courage to ask her to dance, and Vince Vaughn is getting so excited. So the camera keeps on cutting to Vince Vaughn getting so psyched that his friend is finally making a move. Right? He's like, "It's on, babe. It's on, babe." And the other friend in the booth is so drunk that he doesn't even know what Vince Vaughn is talking about. He's like, like completely glazed, like,
yeah,
like what? And then Vince Vaughn goes, "It's on, it's on, it's on." So then we're watching, Jon Favreau dancing with Heather Graham, who's unbelievable in this brief scene, by the way. She's I would say she's a character actress, but she had played a fairly memorable role in another movie called Boogie Nights, which was really, really well known. But she's unbelievable in this last sequence, and I'll talk about why in a second. But then you see this like sort of unbearable suspense when the music changes. Is Jon Favreau, he's like basically leaving, and she gently encourages him to stay on the floor even though the music has sped up. And then he starts getting more and more confident. And what I love about this climactic sequence, Eric, is that you can see his confidence inching up bit by bit by bit by bit. It's in the acting and it's in the pacing of the scene. You know what I mean? Like the more the scene progresses, I just don't understand how a scene that is that fast paced can show something like his confidence going up in tiny little steps, so that by the time he's confidently swinging her around and doing these incredible moves on the dance, we're all of us who are watching, our jaws are on the floor with delight. And then like we're completely rooting for him at this point, and we're so psyched that he pulled it through, right? And then the funniest thing is the camera is cutting between them on the dance floor, the band playing, they're playing the song Daddy-O. And then the funniest cuts are to Vince Vaughn and the friend in the booth. And so when Jon Favreau is dancing like crazy, there's this final shot of Vince Vaughn. He's crying. He's crying with happiness that his buddy pulled it off. And I cracked up laughing. Like, I forgot that he was so incredibly emotionally moved by the fact that his friend pulled this off.
Yeah.
So but the other thing that I'll just say this about climactic scenes in general that are done really well is I love it when you can follow the main thread of the action, which is Jon Favreau and his confidence and his dancing with this girl. But your attention can be quickly diverted to other things, like the band playing or Vince Vaughn in the booth, without disrupting your focus on the main thread. I think by the way, I think that must be an editing thing. You know what I mean? To get that just right, so that, because in some, like for example, in some of the messier action climactic sequences that finish out Marvel movies, for example, you sometimes you don't know what to focus on. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's so messy and it's so much spectacle. You don't know what to focus on. You don't know who you're rooting for. You don't even know like who you're following. But really, really great climactic scenes, especially in romantic comedies like Swingers and When Harry Met Sally. You absolutely know what to focus on, but you can still take a breath and pause and look at other things and laugh.
Right.
That's my Swingers thing.
Yeah, and I really think it's something that you mentioned by describing that scene was that we need, sometimes in a climactic scene, we need like somebody who serves as the audience in the movie.
Yes,
somebody who
yeah.
It's like we feel validated when we see a character that's reacting the same as we are.
Yes. And
that is totally essential when it comes to just cutting away to reaction shots. And also for character development in general, like, you know, characters that, you know, were maybe stern or mean or however they were in the beginning of the movie, now are all of a sudden completely different because they've changed. Or, you know, I don't remember specifically if this actually happened, but I'm just remembering like a small detail of the School of Rock movie. Do you know that movie?
Uh-huh.
You know how like the principal is this, you know, very overbearing, very annoying, you know, character who has to like enforce the rules, and, you know, nobody can have fun. This is like a religious prep school where nobody can have fun.
Right.
But then she has that scene with Jack Black where she's like, I used to be the cool, what's that? Who's that actress? Do you know that actress? I forgot. She's great, but she was like, I used to be the cool parent, okay? But you know what people think of me now? They call me a bitch. That's what they think. And Jack Black's like, no, I'm sure they don't. I'm really sure they don't, but they definitely do. And I don't remember in the ending specifically if they had her do. I think they had Jack Black and her end up together, but I think she was totally on board with the music at the end of the movie. And so especially when somebody changes and then becomes like, you know, how the audience is and reacts to to what's happening, that can be a very beautiful moment, you know.
Yes, especially in that climactic sequence when there's been a transition, when the change is reflected, and then when all of a sudden you're on their side. You know
especially
what
I mean? When villains become heroes too. That's another thing, because if like, you know, we could definitely see Avatar as being a huge influence with that. Like, you know, characters who were on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum are now, you know, fighting alongside one another. So that they do that very beautifully.
Yeah, I by the way, speaking of climactic scenes, I remember reading a great piece online that just deconstructed the final episode of Avatar, and that the battle sequence, you know, between what's his face and his sister,
Zuko and Azula. Yeah.
Zuko and Azula.
I can't believe you don't remember his name. That's crazy. He is the best. He is the best character, probably.
But anyway, that final battle sequence, they just broke it down bit by bit by bit and talked about how the orchestral music supported the incredible drama and conflict of that scene. So animation-wise, that has to be one of the best climactic scenes ever, you know, in terms of how that wrapped that up, even though there was so much more to come after that battle scene. I will just say one last thing about Swingers. I wanted to mention Heather Graham's performance in that. She is so subtle in that climactic scene. She's so subtle. She has briefest part, just girl who
Right.
dances with him.
Girl who
And
maybe he ends up with, you know.
who maybe he ends up with, but yet there's the gentle encouragement. Like there's a look that she gives him to say, let's stay and try this out. That's one. And then two, the more and more confidence he gets, the sexier she gets in that scene. So she maintains direct eye contact with him, and she starts playing the part of, in the dance where she's like really being sort of the vamp, in that dance.
Right.
And so she's just so compelling in that scene. And I think that she is the most amazing scene partner. Actors often talk about this, by the way. Actors talk about the fact that sometimes they act so much better when they have a scene partner who gives them something to react to,
Yeah.
because then it becomes like music. It becomes like a band jamming together, So I think in that case, Jon Favreau and Heather Graham together, they are ideal scene partners for each other. They just mesh together so beautifully in that scene. So that's
funny.
Swingers for me.
That's really great that you mentioned that. That just reminded me of how what's the actor's name? Ian McKellen, who was Gandalf.
Yes.
Ian McKellen. Yeah, because
Who I
he
shook
was
his
talking
hand one
about
time.
what?
I shook
What?
his hand one time.
Oh, really?
I did.
When?
I did. I
didn't
went
know
to
that.
see him in a one-man show. It was a one-man show that he was doing to talk about Shakespeare. And he was talking about interpreting all these different Shakespearean characters. So for Richard V, the play Richard V, he asked for audience volunteers to come up and play the dead corpses on the battlefield.
Really?
Richard V, because his big soliloquy. Yeah, so he called, and of course my friend and I raised our hand, and he picked us. And as we came up on the stage, number one, the whole show was amazing. He's amazing in person. Like, he's
Right.
just so delightful. But when we ran up on stage, he greeted each one of us, and he shook our hands. He like put his hand on our shoulder. He was like, "Thank you so much for volunteering. Thank you so much for volunteering."
Really?
And then we lay down and acted as corpses on the battlefield. He had to keep on telling us, "Please, corpses, it is not seemly if you start laughing," because we were laughing at his jokes, and he was like, you're just ruining my whole
That's so
grand
funny.
soliloquy." Yeah, it was great.
I had no idea that you did that.
Yeah,
But yeah, so
Ian McKellen. Yes.
I just remember hearing about him talking about The Hobbit because I remember him being, I think there was I forgot exactly where I heard this, but apparently he was just emotional by the fact that he was not able to have the same camaraderie that he had, on Lord of the Rings, because he's just having to act with like green screen and like, you're just like, you're not, they're shooting, close-ups and stuff separately because it just saved time, it saved money, and as a result, it's like million fuck ton of cameras and lighting, bunch of green screen, and you're just sitting there and you're playing this beloved character who you've had a relationship with for so long, and so many fans care about, to just be devolved to like something so soulless. Like, actually talking about it now, it just feels really sad for some reason. Wow. but those movies are a testament to that, because
Yes.
who remembers like the endings, as being good.
Yes.
Like, they were just, I mean, I'm somewhat of a defender when it comes to like some good elements about those movies, especially when it comes to just music and sweeping shots of, exteriors and stuff like that. Like, that's really easy to love, but objectively, that those movies get that wrong. And it's not as organic.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah, climactic scenes can't feel so.
Because they're drawn out of too little material.
That too. Yeah. It has to
That's why they
feel.
do the.
Yeah, it has to feel right, and it can't just feel manufactured and soulless.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So do you want to share another example, or do you
Yeah.
want to wrap up since we've had so many technical difficulties?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Probably the last category. It's sort of a sub. I'm kind of grouping these movies into like, because that's the subcategories of movies that do climactic scenes well, or what I care about when it comes to this. But like, my favorite movies, I look at it as one piece, and it's not just like these parts were individually sort of good. So the last category I would talk about is movies that have some sort, like, the premise is very clear in terms of there's going to be some big contest or some big tournament or some big, like, performance at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That you're looking forward to, and the characters, like, sort of training for,
Yes.
but they also have some sort of character arc. So probably the best example of that for me is Drumline. So Nick Cannon.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and in a school band, college band, and then they have that final performance at the end, where he finally gets to kick it, and that's also really great because in the lead up to that, he's realized that his ego is too big, and he's sort of removed himself comfortably, thinking like, this is the punishment I deserve. I don't deserve to be a part of this really great performance that my band is putting on.
Right.
But then they have that final. They're like, oh wait, but we need the drum lines to settle a tie, and it's like, nah, get in there, and he's given that chance. So
yeah.
But that's just like formulaically, it's very exciting, because it's just so simple. There's that, and then there's Karate Kid.
Yes.
Both
I
Karate
love
Kid.
that example. Yes.
Yeah, both Karate Kid series. It's like, big turn. You gotta fucking win. That's it. And did you learn how to?
In a body bag.
Did you learn how to do that cool kick, or did you? I mean, are you gonna use that at the end? I don't know.
Sweep the leg.
Yeah, sweep. It's so iconic. There's so many iconic lines from that first movie. I also personally love the Jaden Smith one, but it's so exciting. And what else? Random one is Stomp the Yard. Have you seen that?
I have not.
Stomp the Yard is about, like, it's a stepping move, dancing. It's like step up, but like it's a little harder. But that's also one of those classic, college, contests, sports or group team movies. The writing is like whatever, but there's a basic story setup. I mean, just to give you like a basic rundown, like, it's a guy, his brother and him are dancers, and they go to like these like really sort of underground contests and stuff to dance that are kind of illegal.
Yeah.
And his brother gets shot and killed, and then he goes to college, and he feels like he's sort of removed from this part of his life, which was dancing. But then he gets back into dancing with a dance like frat group there, and then they have a big then there's this like dipshit other group of frat guys who are also dancers, and they suck because they try stealing from him, like, his dance moves. So at this final performance, the evil group does one of the guys who's the dipshit, like the one dipshit guy, steals like one of his most iconic moves, and he does it. And the main guy, whose brother died, his brother had this move that he did that was like the coolest thing you'll ever see. It's where he like slides on the ground completely upside down from his like shoulder, from his elbow, and like his shoulder, and
it's
he
like the equivalent of the dragon in or the crane in Karate
right.
Kid.
But it's like way cooler because it's something. It's way cooler because it's something that's physically like looks impossible, because he's literally straight up like a pencil, and he just moves across the floor. So he hadn't revealed that, and because he was too scared to perform that again or do that again because it was his brother's thing, and like, it's just like opening wounds, right? But in the final dance performance and stuff, he does it, and like, obviously it's better than whatever shit the other guy was doing. It wasn't even like his style. So super cool. So just like,
I actually want to see this now.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's one of those, it's really simple movie, like college movies. But
I love the fact that you identified this whole genre of final tournament, final challenge, final contest. I love that. And what's funny to me is that that movie, you know how I said that it's super hard to pull off those big final Marvel action sequences? Yeah. It doesn't feel like it would be super hard to pull off the final tournament, the final challenge.
No.
Like, because it feels like it's a tried and true, it works. It just works,
exactly.
And so, and you just have to make sure to not screw it up, on the basics. By the way, the classic example for me in the final tournament climactic sequence, and it's actually one that operates at a much quieter pace and tone throughout, but it's one of Dad's all-time favorite movies, which is Hoosiers. And for years, and this may still hold true, we had a joke that if Dad stumbled across Hoosiers playing on television, he could not look away. Like, he had to watch it till the end. And so, like, every single time Hoosiers came on TV, like, Dad would be caught, like, pinned in place. No matter what he was doing, no matter where we had to go, he had to watch the movie through to the end.
That's
and
funny.
so, yeah, and it has as its lead actor one of the greatest actors of all time, who's Gene Hackman. He's unbelievable in that movie. But the movie is very quiet and small scale. It's about this small town Indiana basketball team, that improbably made its way up to the state championship. So it's a very quiet little character study, and none of the characters are memorable, particularly none of them. Yeah. And what's interesting though is that it quietly works its way up to the final game, the final tournament,
Right.
And it's just such a satisfying payoff. And that to me is an example of that's just a director and a screenwriter that just went out and they did their job well. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't try to mess around with it. They didn't try to do anything crazy with it. Yeah.
I mean, as a result, it can be it can sound very formulaic and cheesy, or
right.
Not like highbrow, but who cares? It's fun. It's entertaining.
Yeah.
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 And it doesn't cost as much money as these Marvel movies, so.
Yes. So I referenced this earlier when we were talking about this episode before today. But I was saying that, that's one of the things that's hard for me sometimes. I love really good assassin movies. Like, Dad and I just watched Equalizer 3, and I love that character that Denzel Washington plays. Yeah. I love the fact that he somebody called it that he plays this like very deadly assassin guy with weird uncle energy, and that is the appeal of him. Like, he has weird uncle or grandfather energy. He's very grandfatherly, very like mellow. Mm-hmm. And so but anyway, in the assassin movies with John Wick and with the Equalizer movie and with Taken, there's no climactic sequence because they're just killing people from start to finish.
I was trying to argue for John Wick, but I feel like I couldn't. It didn't really fit to me. But.
I mean, I enjoy those movies. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't even say it. It feels even bad to admit it that I enjoy stylized violence.
No, but that's why the new John Wick is really good, because it does that in a very unique way. So in the way that the other movies didn't, in my opinion. Yeah,
but anyway, I mean, I like the last John Wick just fine, but I like the first one the best. But I will just say that sometimes I wonder if there would be ways to shake up that formula rather than it's, kill more and more and more people, like whether or not there'd be moments to interrupt or change around the pacing, or whether or not you'd want to do something different. So as an example, I think you've seen this more recently than me, but I feel like there is a sequence in Raging Bull, which I have not seen for probably more than 20 years. Isn't there like a color sequence in that movie?
There's like colored footage of like childhood footage, and the rest of the movie is black and white.
It's black and white. That's right. And I just remember thinking that movie. I don't really love Scorsese, but I think that his movies are really bleak and grim, and people think that they're really funny, but I just think that they're really bleak and grim. And so then
best one is Goodfellas, probably.
Yes, best one is Goodfellas. But I remember watching Raging Bull, and I was thinking, this is a beautiful movie. It's making me feel a little heavy. And then all of a sudden this color sequence comes, and I'm like, oh, whoa, Yeah. And so I think it is interesting, just like the Christopher Nolan choice to do the atomic bomb silent. I think that directors, when they are keeping things at pretty much the same level throughout the film, I think that it is a really good idea to think about disrupting the climactic sequence through silence or slow down, because in most cases climactic sequence are build, but for a movie that's been nothing but build, it's really sometimes maybe it would be good to have a scene where things are wrapped up in a slower, quieter, more peaceful way.
Yeah.
So that's my sort of final thought on that.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts for you on climactic sequences?
I mean, one more thought on the John Wick thing. I just think
Mm-hmm.
I think the last movie has been the best because they took the element of, oh, he's just gonna kill more people.
Yeah.
They did that, but they also added, oh, now he's put in a death match with his friend. And
Yes.
and it's a whole different. Neither of them wanted to be doing that, but it's
Yes.
objectively the most exciting part in the movie because what's going to happen? Is one going to kill the other? Are they both going to kill each other? Who's going to So they spun that a bit. I thought that they spun that a bit in a unique way, but that is a really great
That gives
point.
it more meaning. That gives it more meaning than I felt when I was watching it.
Right.
I think that the movie was just too long for me to feel what you're saying. But now that you
Yes.
say that, I'm like, I should go back and rewatch that.
Okay, what made that movie great for me was the messaging. I just thought it was all about friendship and sacrifice, and I thought it actually stood.
So long.
I know, but like it was fun. They took what John Wick 3 did and made it, actually meaningful. If they were going to draw out this long action thing, like they were going to make it cool. Anyways, I know it's not a movie too, but I just finished rewatching Death Note, and I know that you haven't seen it, and maybe a lot of people haven't seen it, but when you were talking about building, like that's all that show does in the beginning. The first half is just build, like it's a back and forth cat and mouse sort of dynamic, but then at a certain point they cut it off because the cat gets the mouse or whatever, like because that chase is over, right? So a lot of people argue that the rest of the show, there's like 12 episodes after that happens, but a lot of people argue that it dips off, and I disagree because I think it was really bold of them to just cut it off and and build that, the part in that you were talking about in When Harry Met Sally, when they're in the kitchen and stuff. It was like, if to me it felt like that, but for the rest of the show, up until the very end when there was a very climactic finish, and nobody that says that it got worse after that halfway point says that the ending is bad. Everybody says that the ending is really good, but I think it's only really good because of all that build up. But they couldn't just keep building. They had to have a good pace. So
Yeah. Do you know what just occurred to me, Eric?
what?
I think the reason why I have been thinking so much about climactic scenes and these great examples of them is because for me, the best ones are when the emotional beats are so beautifully staged.
Yeah.
So that you feel them, like you feel what you feel, you know what I mean? Like you feel what you're supposed to be feeling. And so as I said, all these different elements like dialogue, like, the screenplay and the music and the acting and the pacing and the editing are all coming together really beautifully. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why these climactic sequences are really sticking out to me is because the news has been so horrible lately.
Yeah.
And the onslaught of commentary, it's not just the news itself, but the onslaught of commentary on social media has been just so relentless and so grim and depressing. So I find myself, it's like a wall that I can't get handholds on. I don't know what to think or feel anymore. You know what I mean? I don't know what to think or feel, and I don't know how to so like the way that the news is delivered and the commentary is delivered these days, it's like you're getting a million storylines fed to you in very incomplete fragments. So there's no emotion, there's too many emotional beats without any kind of coherent storylines, and I can't make sense of it, and I can't make meaning of it, and I can't find myself in these storylines. I can't locate my sense of self in these storylines because it's such cacophony and such despair and such horror, Mm-hmm. And so I think that I know that movies are artificial, but they give you these constructed fictional worlds where you can go in and, do you know what I mean? You can relate and you can be and you can understand how you're supposed to feel, and it feels genuine because it feels like it relates to something in human life. Right. So that's actually why I think I came to this topic. because I cannot fucking make sense of what's going on right now. I can't.
Yeah.
And it's making me feel horrible. And so thank God for like movies and artists out there who just, and stories out there who make me, I know who I'm supposed to be in relation to these stories. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I agree. I mean, there's a reason why it's an escape.
Yes.
And, you know, some of them will just be that, just an escape. Some of
Yeah.
the movies and TV shows, but the best ones let you escape and then let you come back with learning something or taking
Yes.
something away.
Yes.
And not all of
Or
them do
knowing
that.
something about yourself.
Or no,
Yes.
yeah, especially when it comes to yourself. So
Yes.
I agree with that
Yeah.
completely. And I'm glad
All right.
glad that you brought that up, because that definitely, I mean, yeah, that's what happens, you know, at the ends of these movies and TV shows when they
Yeah.
display that. So
Well, I'm glad we worked in this episode. I'm glad we soldiered on despite the technical difficulties.
yeah,
And I hope that you have a really enjoyable and productive weekend. I'm sure it'll be a lot of hard work.
Thank
but
you.
I'm glad we worked in this one, and I love you so much, as you know.
Love you too.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you. Bye.